I'm Ashley, 27, female. I live in a quiet suburban town in a small apartment that I'm proud to call my own. As a logistics coordinator, my life is all about making sure things get where they need to go smoothly and efficiently. It's a world of spreadsheets, schedules, and predictability. For years, I believed my family operated on similar, logical principles, but I was wrong. My brother's wedding wasn't just a celebration. It was the final, chaotic shipment that exposed a rot in the system I could no longer ignore, forcing me to reroute my entire life. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. My family has always orbited around my younger brother, Ryan. At 25, he was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. I was the practical one, the responsible one, the one who moved out at 22 and built a life for herself without a safety net. Ryan, a social media manager, still lived at home, his life subsidized by mom and dad, and he was about to marry Chloe, a boutique sales associate who seemed to value brand names more than character. The wedding was, in my mother Brenda's words, the social event of our community. Brenda, a part-time real estate agent at 51, saw the wedding not as a union of two people, but as a marketing opportunity for our family. Every decision, from the ridiculously overpriced venue to the 5-tier cake, was designed for maximum social media impact. My father, Mark, a 55-year-old financial advisor, just nodded along, his face permanently etched with a mixture of pride and stress. He footed the bills, his silence purchased with the promise of neighborhood prestige. My contribution was supposed to be simple: stay out of the way, wear the unflattering bridesmaid dress, and smile for the pictures. The real financial backing for this spectacle, however, came from a much quieter source: my grandmother, Helen. At 79, my grandmother was a retired accountant, a sharp, witty woman who had managed her money with incredible skill. She was generous to a fault, especially with Ryan. She'd paid for his car, his college degree, and now a significant portion of his wedding. In the weeks leading up to the big day, the tension was palpable. My mother would call me with frantic updates. "Ashley, Chloe has decided the lilies we ordered are too fragrant. Your grandmother will just have to send more money." Or, "Your father is worried about the open bar bill. I told him Helen wouldn't want Ryan's guests to be thirsty." Each conversation felt less like family planning and more like a corporate funds request. Grandma Helen never complained. She'd just smile her gentle smile and say, "It's for my grandson's happiness." I tried to talk to her once, a week before the wedding. We were having tea in her immaculate little home, surrounded by books and memories. "Grandma, are you sure about all this? It's a lot of money." She patted my hand, her eyes knowing. "It's only money, dear. Family is what's important." But as I watched my parents and brother treat her with a kind of cheerful neglect, I started to wonder what they thought family really meant. They'd visit her when they needed a check signed, their affection turning on and off like a faucet. I was the one who visited just to talk, who helped with her garden, who listened to her stories about Grandpa. They saw a bank. I saw the woman who taught me how to read. This difference in perception was a crack in our family's foundation, and the wedding was about to become the earthquake that split it wide open. The perfect day they were planning was built on a very ugly truth. The wedding day arrived in a flurry of hairspray and fake pleasantries. The ceremony was beautiful, a perfect illusion of familial bliss held in a sun-drenched garden. Ryan and Chloe looked happy, or at least they looked like the catalog version of happy. My parents floated through the crowd, accepting congratulations as if they were the ones who had just achieved a major life milestone. The reception was where the facade began to crumble. Held in a grand ballroom that cost more than my car, the atmosphere was thick with champagne and expectations. I did my duty, smiling through speeches and posing for photos. The official photographer was everywhere, capturing every curated moment for the future wedding album, and more importantly, for Ryan and Chloe's social media feeds. The moment that changed everything happened near the gift table. I was talking to a cousin when I saw the photographer trying to organize a photo of the happy couple with my parents and grandmother. Grandma Helen, looking elegant in a lavender dress, stood proudly next to Ryan. My mother, Brenda, was adjusting Chloe's veil, whispering something in her ear. The photographer said, "Okay, big smiles, everyone." Just as the flash was about to go off, my mother leaned over to Chloe, loud enough for me and several others to hear, and said with a smug chuckle, Make sure we get a good one with the old ATM. We need to document the investment." The air went still. A few people nearby exchanged awkward glances. Grandma Helen's smile didn't falter, but I saw the light in her eyes dim. It was a flicker, a momentary shuddering of her spirit, but I saw it. She had heard. My brother Ryan just grinned, oblivious or uncaring. My father Mark stood there, saying nothing. Rage, cold and sharp, shot through me. I stepped forward. "Mom, what did you just say?" My voice was low, but it cut through the polite chatter. Brenda turned to me, her expression annoyed. "Oh, Ashley, don't be so dramatic. It's a joke." "A joke? You just called the woman who funded this entire circus an ATM, in front of everyone." My father finally spoke, his voice tight with anger. "Ashley, not now. You're making a scene. I'm making a scene." I looked from his face to my mother's, then to my brother's vapid grin. "She's been your personal bank for years, and you stand here and humiliate her. For what? A picture." The confrontation escalated quickly. My mother's face flushed with anger. "You are ruining your brother's day. You've always been jealous of him." Before I could respond, my father grabbed my arm. "That's enough. Go outside and cool off now." I shook him off. "No, I'm not going anywhere. Someone needs to stand up for her." And that's when it happened. My father, a man who had never laid a hand on me in my life, slapped me. It wasn't a hard slap, but it was the shock that stole my breath. The sharp sting on my cheek was nothing compared to the sting of betrayal. He had slapped me to defend my mother's cruelty. In that instant, the photographer's flash went off, capturing the ugly tableau. My shocked face, my father's fury, my mother's triumphant sneer, and my grandmother's quiet heartbreak in the background. That photograph would cost them more than they could ever imagine. I left the reception immediately. The slap had been a point of no return. I didn't cry. I was too numb, too filled with a clarity that felt like ice in my veins. I drove straight to Grandma Helen's house using the spare key she'd given me years ago. I knew she wouldn't stay at the wedding much longer, and I needed to be there when she got home. She arrived about an hour later, looking tired and frail. She didn't seem surprised to see me. She simply took off her coat, sat in her favorite armchair, and looked at me with weary eyes. "I'm so sorry, Grandma," I said, my voice finally cracking. "I'm so sorry for what they did, for what they are." She gave a small, sad smile. "It's not your fault, Ashley. You have a good heart. You always have." She paused, her gaze drifting to a handsome leather-bound book on her side table. "I suppose I've known for a long time. I just didn't want to believe it. They've been using you, Grandma, for years." "I know, dear," she said softly. "Love can make you blind, but numbers always tell the truth." She reached for the leather-bound book and handed it to me. It was a ledger, the kind an old school accountant would use. The cover was embossed with a single word, loans. I opened it. Inside, in my grandmother's perfect, precise script, was a meticulously detailed record of every single dollar she had ever given my parents and my brother since I'd moved out of the house. It wasn't a diary of grievances. It was a professional accounting of funds. Each entry had a date, an amount, the recipient, and the stated purpose. $5,000 to Mark and Brenda for property taxes. $2,500 to Ryan for car repairs. $20,000 to Brenda for kitchen remodel. And a staggering $50,000 to Ryan and Chloe for wedding expenses. But there was another column that made my blood run cold, repayment status. Next to every single entry, in the same neat handwriting, were the words overdue or defaulted. Over nearly a decade, they had taken hundreds of thousands of dollars from her. Next to some of the larger entries for my parents, there were little notes in the margins. One next to a $30,000 entry read, "For Mark's investment portfolio after a bad quarter. He promised a 10% return within a year. That was 3 years ago." Another note next to a payment for a luxury cruise Brenda had taken read, "Brenda said her commission checks were delayed. Promised repayment upon closing of the Miller House." I knew for a fact the Miller House had sold 2 years prior. It was all there in black and white. This wasn't generosity, it was exploitation. They hadn't just accepted her gifts, they had systematically drained her savings under the guise of familial loans they never intended to repay. The old ATM comment wasn't a joke, it was a casual admission of their long-term strategy, Grandma. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" I asked, my voice thick with emotion. "Hope," she said simply. I kept hoping they would do the right thing, that they would remember they were my family, not just my beneficiaries. She looked at me, her expression hardening with a resolve I hadn't seen before. Your father hitting you tonight, that was the end of hope. They hurt my grandchild to protect their greed. It's time to balance the books. In that moment, I knew this was no longer just about a slap or an insult. It was about justice. The next 2 weeks were a blur of quiet, focused activity. My family, of course, tried to get in touch. My mother left a series of voicemails that swung wildly from furious, "How dare you embarrass us like that?" to sickly sweet, "Ashley, honey, we're worried about you. This isn't like you." My father sent a single terse text, "We need to talk. You overreacted." I ignored them all. My only communication was with Grandma Helen. Armed with her ledger, we started our investigation. As a logistics coordinator, I was used to tracking complex systems and identifying weak points. My family's finances became my new project. Grandma Helen, with her sharp accountant's mind, was the perfect partner. We weren't just looking at the money she'd given them, we were trying to understand where it had all gone. The first step was a visit to Grandma's lawyer, a kind, no-nonsense man named Mr. Davison. We showed him the ledger. He read through it slowly, his expression growing more and more grim. "Helen," he said, looking at her over his glasses, "these aren't gifts. These are unsecured loans. You have a documented history of their requests and their failure to pay. This is a very strong case for financial elder abuse." The term hit me like a punch to the gut. It sounded so clinical, so severe, but it was exactly what was happening. Mr. Davison advised us to gather more concrete evidence of their financial mismanagement, so we dug deeper. I used my skills in online research to look up public records. It was shockingly easy to find information they clearly thought was private. We discovered my parents had remortgaged their house not once, but twice in the last 5 years. The kitchen remodel, Grandma funded, had actually gone to pay off a mountain of credit card debt. My father's bad quarter at work wasn't a one-time thing. Public records of financial advisors showed he had several client complaints against him for risky investments. He wasn't a savvy investor who had hit a rough patch. He was a reckless gambler using his mother's money to cover his losses. The trail for my brother, Ryan, was even more infuriating. The car repairs were for a down payment on a brand new sports car he couldn't afford. The money for his student loans had clearly been spent on lavish vacations with Chloe, all documented on his own social media. They weren't even trying to hide it, they just assumed Grandma would never look. The most damning piece of evidence came from a private investigator Mr. Davison recommended. He was discreet and efficient. Within a week, he had a full report. My father had been making regular, large cash withdrawals from his accounts, withdrawals that didn't match any of his documented expenses. The investigator traced them to a series of high-stakes poker games he attended weekly. My dad wasn't just a bad financial advisor, he had a severe gambling problem. My mother wasn't just materialistic, she was an enabler covering their tracks with her mother-in-law's life savings. Sitting in Grandma Helen's living room, surrounded by bank statements, public records, and the investigator's report, the full picture came into horrifying focus. They were drowning in debt, living a lie propped up entirely by an elderly woman's kindness. The slap at the wedding wasn't just a moment of anger. It was the panic of a cornered animal, terrified that the person who might expose them, me, was finally speaking up. They weren't protecting their dignity, they were protecting their secret multi-$100,000 line of credit. With the evidence laid bare, the question became, what next? Mr. Davison laid out our options. We could sue them. We could report my father to the Financial Regulatory Board. We could press criminal charges for elder abuse. But Grandma Helen shook her head. A lawsuit would be public, messy, and it would drag on for years. She said, her voice firm. It would destroy what's left of the family name, and it would give them the chance to play the victims. I don't want a fight. I want a resolution. She had a different plan. One that was far quieter but infinitely more devastating. It was a plan that used their own greed and assumptions against them. It was a plan only a retired accountant could have devised. The first part of the plan involved securing her assets. On Mr. Davison's advice, Grandma Helen immediately established an irrevocable trust. She placed her house, her remaining savings, and her investment portfolio into it. I was named the sole trustee. This meant that she no longer legally owned these assets, the trust did, and as the trustee, I was the only one who could manage them on her behalf, In one swift legal move, the ATM was officially closed for business. They just didn't know it yet. The second part of the plan was more intricate. Mr. Davison drafted a formal loan agreement that consolidated all the money documented in Grandma's ledger into a single, legally binding debt. The total was staggering, over $450,000. The document outlined a strict repayment schedule, with my parents' house listed as collateral. The final piece of the puzzle was the most brilliant. My grandmother had a separate, significant investment account that my parents knew about. They had been hinting for years that they expected it to be their inheritance. This account was deliberately left out of the trust. It was the bait. Our plan was to confront them, but not with anger or accusations. We would confront them with a choice, Mr. Davison explained. We will present them with this loan agreement. They will refuse, of course. They'll call it absurd. Then, you will offer them an alternative. Grandma Helen looked at me. They believe I am a foolish old woman who can be easily manipulated. We will let them continue to believe that, just for a little while longer. A week later, we were ready. I called my father, Dad. I said, my voice calm and neutral. Grandma Helen wants to have a family meeting. It's about her finances and her will. She wants everyone there. You, Mom, Ryan, and Chloe. Mr. Davison will be present. The mention of the will was the hook. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head. He probably thought Grandma was feeling guilty after the wedding fiasco, and was about to offer them a financial olive branch, perhaps even a large inheritance to smooth things over. Of course, he said, his tone instantly becoming more agreeable. We'll be there, when and where. The meeting was set for the following Saturday at Mr. Davison's office. It felt like preparing for a corporate takedown. We had our documents, our strategy, and our resolve. They would walk in expecting to secure their future. They had no idea they were walking into a room to finally pay for their past. The power was no longer in their hands. It was in a legally binding document called a power of attorney that Grandma had also signed, giving me the authority to act on her behalf. They had underestimated the wrong people. The atmosphere in Mr. Davison's conference room was thick with tension. My parents, Brenda and Mark, sat on one side of the polished mahogany table, radiating an aura of forced solemnity. Ryan and Chloe sat beside them, looking bored and occasionally checking their phones. They thought this was a formality, a tedious but necessary step before the reading of a will that would benefit them greatly. Grandma Helen sat at the head of the table, looking calm and composed, with me by her side. Mr. Davison began, "Thank you all for coming. Helen has asked me to preside over this meeting to discuss some important updates regarding her estate." My father leaned forward slightly, a look of greedy anticipation on his face. "Of course, we're here to support Mom in any way we can." "Excellent," Mr. Davison said, his face unreadable. He slid a single, thick document across the table toward my father. "Then let's start with this." Mark picked it up. His brow furrowed as he read the title, Loan Consolidation and Repayment Agreement. He quickly scanned the first page, his confusion turning to disbelief, then to a dark, simmering rage. "What is this?" he demanded, tossing the document onto the table. $450,000. This is ridiculous. These were gifts. My mother chimed in, her voice shrill. "Helen, how could you? After everything we've done for you, we're your family." Grandma Helen spoke for the first time, her voice quiet but strong. "A gift is given with no expectation of return. A loan is given with the promise of repayment. For 10 years, I have held on to your promises. This document simply makes them official." Ryan finally looked up from his phone. "Grandma, we can't afford this. Chloe and I are just starting our lives. The life you started." I said, my voice steady, "was funded by the money in this document. The wedding, the car, the vacations." Brenda stood up, pointing a trembling finger at me. "This is your doing. You've poisoned her against us. Sit down, Brenda," Mr. Davison said calmly, but with an authority that made her obey. He then turned to my father. "Mark, you have two options. You can sign this agreement, and we can work out a payment plan, or you can refuse." Mark scoffed. "We refuse. This is insane. You have no proof." "Oh, but we do," I said, placing a file on the table. I opened it to reveal bank statements, copies of checks, and the top page of the private investigator's report on his gambling. His face went pale. Mr. Davison continued smoothly, as if my father hadn't spoken. "As I was saying, you can refuse, and Helen has prepared for that possibility. She is prepared to offer you an alternative." He slid a second, much thinner document across the table. "This is an agreement to forgive the entire debt, all $450,000, wiped clean. A wave of relief washed over their faces. They looked at each other, triumphant. They had won. "What's the catch?" my father asked, suspicious. "No catch," Mr. Davison said. "To receive this forgiveness, all you have to do is agree to one condition. Helen has an investment portfolio, currently valued at just over $500,000. She will sign it over to you, Mark, Brenda, and Ryan, free and clear. In exchange, you will sign a document legally severing all future claims to the rest of her estate and agreeing to have no further financial contact with her. You take the portfolio, the debt is forgiven, and you walk away clean." It was the perfect trap. They saw $500,000, a golden ticket out of their financial mess. They didn't see that they were trading it for a much larger, protected fortune held in the trust. They were being offered a one-time payout to sign away their rights to the ATM forever. Without a moment of hesitation, my father said, "We'll take it. We'll take the portfolio." My mother and brother nodded eagerly. They spent the next 20 minutes signing documents, their hands moving quickly, desperate to lock in their prize. They signed away the debt. They signed away any future inheritance. They signed away their relationship with my grandmother for a pot of gold. When it was all done, my father stood up, a smug smile on his face. "Well, I'm glad we could resolve this amicably." Grandma Helen looked at him, a deep sadness in her eyes. "I am too, Mark." As they were leaving, I handed my brother Ryan a single, plain white envelope. "This is from me, a proper wedding gift." He opened it right there in the hallway. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It was a high-quality copy of the photograph taken at the wedding, the one capturing the moment after the slap. On the back, I had written a simple message: "The moment you sold your family for a party, I hope it was worth it." He stared at the photo, his face turning ashen. For the first time, a flicker of understanding, of shame, crossed his face. They walked out of that office with a check in hand, but they had lost everything of value. The aftermath was both silent and deafening. My parents, Ryan and Chloe, got their money. As expected, they liquidated the portfolio almost immediately. We later learned through Mr. Davison that they paid off their most pressing debts, put a down payment on a new, flashier house for Ryan and Chloe, and my mother bought a new luxury car. To the outside world, they had come into a sudden inheritance and were living the high life. They posted constantly on social media, showcasing their new lifestyle, a perfect picture of success built on a foundation of betrayal. They made no attempt to contact me or Grandma Helen. We had served our purpose. The ATM was empty, but they had gotten one last massive withdrawal, and that was all that mattered to them. The silence from their end was a gift. For Grandma Helen and me, life became quieter but richer. With her finances protected in the trust, the constant stress of her family's demands vanished. A weight was lifted from her shoulders. We spent our weekends gardening, trying new recipes, and going through old photo albums. She told me stories about her life, about her career as an accountant, about the smart, savvy woman she was before she became a widow and a matriarch to be plundered. It felt like I was meeting her all over again. About 6 months after the meeting, I helped her sell her large family home, which held too many difficult memories. We found her a beautiful, modern condo in a vibrant retirement community. She made new friends, joined a book club, and started taking painting classes. She was thriving, free from the burden of being a financial resource. My own life changed, too. The anger I had felt for so long was replaced by a sense of peace. I had drawn a line in the sand, and in doing so, I had freed not only my grandmother but myself. I no longer had to play the part of the overlooked daughter in a dysfunctional family drama. I could simply be Ashley. One afternoon, while visiting Grandma in her new home, she handed me a large manila envelope. Inside were documents for a foundation she had established with the bulk of her fortune. The fortune my parents had unknowingly signed away. It was called the Helen Grant for Second Chances, a fund designed to provide scholarships and grants to older women returning to the workforce or starting their own businesses. She had named me the director of the board. "You stood up for me when no one else would," she said, her eyes shining with tears. "You saw my value beyond my bank account. I want you to help other women find their value too." The story of what happened eventually trickled out into the community, as these things always do. People started to look at my parents differently. Their new wealth, once a source of envy, now seemed tainted. My father's client list began to shrink. My mother's real estate sales dwindled. Their social standing, the very thing they had sacrificed their family for, began to crumble. I don't know if they ever feel remorse. I don't know if Ryan ever looks at that wedding photo and feels a pang of regret. But I do know this: they made their choice. They chose money over love, greed over loyalty. In the end, they got what they wanted, but they lost something priceless. Grandma Helen and I, We built a new family legacy from the rubble of the old one, a legacy based not on what you can take from people, but on what you can build together.